Welcome back to the Broadcast Ops Playbook. This show is for teachers building student-led broadcast programs and trying to do it without chaos, burnout, and juggling 10 different tools. I'm your host, Taylor Siebert, and after episode 1, we heard from a lot of you teachers, not just feedback, but stories. Stories about setting boundaries and a great reminder for them about that, about why they started their programs, and about finally seeing some of the fruits of their labor after building the program for years once students were trusted with real responsibility. Today's episode tackles one of the hardest realities in student-led programs. Students start strong, but they begin to fade, they stop showing up, and you, the teacher, quietly carry the load. This episode isn't about motivational hacks. It's about why students care about the program and how structure creates buy-in instead of burnout. So let's get into it. All right, Hoosier, we made it to episode 2. But before we dive in, I want to thank everyone who reached out after episode 1. It was a lot of fun for us to hear from you, some stories and feedback from many of you, and it lines up perfectly with today's topic. But I want to ask you, Hooj, what stood out to you most from the conversations you heard from teachers?
Well, yeah, I just want to echo. We love hearing from the teachers. I mean, my job is to talk to teachers, so I normally get that on a day-to-day basis, but especially launching something new, trying this podcast, it was super great to even hear some of our veteran teachers say, "Hey, I still got something out of episode 1." And I think that's the biggest takeaway from those conversations is we talked about the need for boundaries and setting the expectations, and it's so interesting that it seems like such a small thing to do. And in the grand scheme of building a broadcast program, it is. But when you have veteran teachers and new teachers say that that was absolutely foundational and the most important thing they heard, I mean, it's true. Even in our personal, building systems for our lives. I mean, just setting expectations. What kind of a person do you want to be? I mean, you can go into the psychology of it, but it was really cool to hear that from teachers and know that, yeah, hey, veteran teachers were saying, I needed reminded of this because I've now overextended myself. And, again, just really cool to hear from those teachers.
Yeah, 100%. If you don't start with why and why you're starting something, it's probably not going to last. So that was really encouraging, and we're excited to dive into episode 2. And one of the things we keep hearing from new teachers and our veteran teachers is they love the program once they start to see students get interested, but they get tired of chasing kids and kids not showing up or flaking out. And that's the tension we're going to unpack for you today. And the pattern we see over and over is students don't see the value of the broadcast program. There's a reason for that. So they don't show up. And teachers end up having to pick up the slack and they end up doing everything, which really isn't why the program is being started. It's a learning experience like we talked about in episode 1. And without realizing it, teachers become really the reason why the program survives. And we're going to use an analogy throughout this that the teacher, you're really the coach. And we're going to compare it to an athletic team. And if you're the coach of an athletic team at your school, you're not playing, you're not the one on the court. And so you've got to get students to buy in and get them excited about showing up and being part of something. And so, Hoosier, I want to ask you, you've been a part of a program, you've helped build programs, we've seen it time and time again. Why do you think students start really excited and then maybe they start to slowly disappear and stop showing up maybe after the first couple weeks?
Yeah, well, thanks for stealing my analogy about the coach, but
I,
that's what
I
I
was
get for
queuing, I was queuing it up, so now you can really hit it home.
yeah, no, that's what I get for giving out my best ideas when we're practicing the show. No, I think the thing that I've noticed is the gear is really cool, and we talked about this in episode 1. Gear is awesome, and it's a great way to get initial students interested. Um, Even broadcasting is fun. When we were talking to one of the teachers giving us feedback, I mean, he started talking about just, the atmosphere that you get at these games. And I said, man, why did you have to say that? Because now I need to go be on a mic. Like, I need to go do a broadcast because I, just haven't had to do one in a while. Um, but I think the real thing is the year is a long time. And especially when you get into a grind. My local high school here, we had 3 total basketball games last week. One of them was an away game, but there were 2. It was a Thursday and a Friday night game, and it was the same crew that was there doing both games. And when you have, 2 nights in a row or 2 home games a week or 3 home games a week, some of that stuff can just really wear down on a student who also has school and homework and other responsibilities. They might have a job. And so you start to realize that it turns into more of like a 14-hour day for that student, and sometimes that's just not always easy for them to keep up throughout the year. And so just and teachers feel this too, right? It's the reason that everyone's kind of really happy when the first semester comes to an end and it's Christmas break. And then they come back with a lot of excitement to start the second semester. We just can only go so long as humans before needing a break. And it's the same way for students.
Yeah. And I don't think, a lot of teachers, students aren't drifting or stopping because they're lazy. I think they drift when it feels optional. And so just like a sports team, right? Um, the games aren't optional. And so you've got to put a little bit of ownership on the students. And so if they feel like helpers, they might fade like, oh, the teacher will fill in and they'll take care of it. But if the student feels like the owner, we've seen time and time again that they're going to stick around and stay. And so, you know, I like to say this ownership really changes everything. We talk about empowering students quite a bit. And we talked to Jordan Burns at Nixa about this. And his program went from 6 students to 55 plus. And that didn't happen by accident. Started as a club. Now it's a full year class. And it grew because students owned roles, not just tasks when they showed up. But that didn't happen overnight, and I think that's one of the things if you wanna take away from this episode is these things don't happen, week to week, they happen year to year, and you just continue to grind, and you find those students who really wanna take ownership of that, and then you start to train, more students who wanna take ownership roles in that. But I wanna ask you, Hooj, what stood out to you from Jordan's approach from some of the things he shared with us.
Yeah, I think the first and the most I think the most important thing was he had a passion for it. He had a passion for the broadcasting and for making it student led. He's interested on a personal level in broadcasting, but it wasn't to the point where he had to be involved in all the broadcasts. And we'll talk about that here next about, dependency. But he really cared about getting the students involved in broadcast and teaching them how to do their roles the correct way and really outlining what their responsibilities were and kind of building, a year over year structure. And we talk about how it took time, but he started, like you said, 6 students, but now it's at the point where he has his main director. When they do football games, this is the guy that's or gal that's in the seat, always camera switching. That's their job. And maybe they do a JV game or they do other games and they are using those opportunities to train up the other students. But that's what he does. And you see that it's not just the big games and the students who've been doing it the longest. It's also the intention to look at the students who aren't getting as many opportunities and finding ways to, integrate them. And he even told us, a story that recently the student who normally runs the switcher wasn't able to be there. And he's like, all right, we're going to do a little trial by fire or, throw the dog in the water and teach you how to swim in real time. And he just chucked a student in there who had observed and knew how to, you know, run the system. The student didn't not know how to run the tools. They just had never actually directed a 6 camera broadcast before, however many cameras Jordan has. And so that was a huge to me is like, yes, sometimes you just have to throw students out there and let them learn. But you can also take a more structured approach to making sure that they have opportunities, maybe in some less critical moments. That way they are prepared when it comes time for the game to actually start.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that stood out to me was he does provide now, and we'll share more as we get into more episodes. He's actually created a system that we're creating as well inside of Broadcast Ops for teachers to use. But every student gets a free concession stand item. But that didn't motivate kids to show up. That's just a result of them coming. That's a reward that they get. But that's not motivating kids. It was about, hey, this is your role. I'm going to coach you in that role and I'm going to push you. And there's tension around that. But I think kids love that when they get pushed a little bit inside a role. If they just show up, do camera, don't talk to anybody the entire game, guess what? They're probably not going to come back. No one engaged with them. No one, it didn't feel like there was real responsibility. And sometimes there needs to be consequences. When a kid doesn't do their job, you need to call them out on that. He talked about that a lot where he was pulling students aside and saying, "Hey, you need to get better at this." I think students thrive when they get that type of feedback because it doesn't happen a lot in school. Most of the time in school, you just kind of are going through the motions. But when a teacher kind of says something to you that perks it's like, whoa, I've never heard something like that. I think students like that and like coming back to that. And, another teacher I'm gonna give a shout out to, Matt Hinkle, who gave us some great feedback, and so I wanna give him a shout out. He does an incredible job of this. He doesn't have a class. His students are all volunteers that show up, and they're not showing up for him, they're showing up for each other and their team, which is a constant thing that we see in programs that are, being built, and he coaches them. He's constantly talking to them throughout the broadcast, and that makes students wanna come back. So remember that. It's not just, hey, student shows up, they do their job, and you don't talk to them the entire night. Guess what? They're probably gonna those are the students that are fading. Would you agree with that, Hoosh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, just to go into it just a little bit more, is I read a book when I was in junior high school. It's called Do Hard Things. And the subtitle of it was a teenage rebellion against low expectations, which is absolutely my character of like, I hated that there was not a lot expected from me other than to just show up, learn these things, and submit tests. I felt like I was created to do more, that I wanted to do more, and that I felt like I could truly thrive under taking on more responsibility. And sitting here, 5 years removed from having that responsibility, obviously it worked. And so that was a big thing for me, and I think as I think about working with students and working with programs, I think that, like you said, Taylor, they want that responsibility. They want to be pushed. It's what makes people go out for sports because they know they're gonna get better. It's what makes people do more than just show up at school at 8 a.m. and leave at 3:30. Yeah, if you've got those kids, you're now involving them more and you're giving them a purpose, something to show up to regular classes for. And I think, a side effect, a good side effect, is if they get more involved in broadcasting, you might even see their normal class grades go up because they're more involved. And that's, people talk about it with athletics. If there are people going out for extracurricular activities, and it doesn't just have to be sports, they're usually more involved in a regular school day as well. And that's a broadcast program falls under an extracurricular activity as well as a class time thing. And so it's huge to keep kids engaged in the world and being social and showing up and learning how to live in the place that we call planet Earth and engage in society.
Yeah, I love that. Great insight. Shifting a little bit, we want to talk about how teachers can accidentally create dependency. And the hard truth is I've fallen victim of this, running a business and also in doing broadcasts when helped start Heartland's broadcast program, starting Strive, is over reminding, over covering, overextending, just doing too much, and students then undercommit. They don't feel like they're really doing anything because you're doing it all. Um, how have you seen that when teachers end up saving the broadcast instead of coaching it?
Yeah, I think it is really hard to say no. That's something personally I've had to learn how to do a better job of, because I've definitely overextended myself, and I've been working and talking with teachers that are new to this, and really, hammering home the point of like, especially if it's year one, don't say yes to everything. If you're in year 10 and you want to keep saying yes, that's up to you. You've done it. You have history, you have experience. But in year one, say yes to as few things as possible just to get a solid foundation. But I think what really happens is when teachers are engaged, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I was upset that Taylor took my point away. Uh, but you become so involved in actually doing the broadcast that you don't take enough time to be that coach for your students, to have an outward view of the system as a whole. Again, you are, as a teacher building a program, you're building a system. And I can relate to this. My dad's like we've mentioned a few times, he's a head basketball coach. He has to see the thing as a whole, right? He's got to look at the program. He's got to look at, for varsity, you get 14 people on a bench. So he's got to be focused, you know, how do these 14 people play a role into the game? Obviously, you got your five starters, but then how are you developing your JV kids, and how's the junior high program doing? Is that, setting up students well for, you know, getting into the varsity program? And what are we doing in elementary? As you start to think about it, there's a lot more than just the team that you have, the 20 or 30 or 40 kids that you have. It extends all the way top to bottom from where they start. And you got to start looking at that with your broadcast program. And if you don't, all of a sudden people are like, man, we had a lot of students at the start and then we ran out. And I'm like, well, no, the students are there. They just haven't been properly developed. They haven't known that this is something that they can do. A lot of younger students might want to try it and they don't know how to get involved because they look at it, maybe as a freshman and they say, man, it's just seniors that get to do this, or they're juniors and seniors and I don't fit in with that group. We'll find an opportunity to plug them in. But again, um, when it becomes teacher dependent, um, it just doesn't work. Um, but being student led and teacher driven, I think teacher driven is maybe the better way to position yourself. You've got the students, and it's your job to drive them along in the program, but let them take the ownership and be able to encourage them. And again, there's a lot of benefits for the students and for you as the teacher as well.
Drive that bus. When it comes to motivating students, yes, we've done it. Free food. We pay students at state events. That's a great motivation. But sometimes I think teachers can get caught up in that, and they focus so much on where those little carrots to get them there. We have found those work just temporarily. Those aren't the students who are really committed. Why do you think incentives like that? Why they don't create long-term buy-in from students?
Well, yeah, I think incentives, in the world of social media, we talk about getting dopamine hits. I think that's all that all that an incentive does, right? It's one of the reasons personally I've tried to cut out social media as much as I can and really focus on things that will build long-term success, and work on things like this podcast, which requires a lot of planning. It we're not going to see the success of this right away. This is not instant gratification. And when students get too used to the incentives, um, even though it might happen subconsciously, their brain will switch from I'm here to broadcast to I get a free concession item and free entry to a game. And it's not, maybe the student's intention at all, but that's just how, your brain works. That's how it works. It's trained to go to where there's the path of least resistance or the most reward. And for students, getting a free concession item or getting paid, that is a reward. That is what they get to see. There will still be some students who their reward is knowing that they got to serve the audience watching, and they got to provide a service to the school and to the athletic program. Um, But let's be honest, we all know kids. Um, they love short, quick, easy wins. And so again, I'm not saying don't incentivize them. And we're not saying don't do that because it is important, but make sure that they're constantly reminded of the larger goal they're working towards. I think that's the biggest thing. You can have incentives while still making sure that they know, hey, this is why we're really doing this. Why are we broadcasting? Well, maybe grandma can't make it to the game. She lives 4 hours away and she wants to watch her grandson. Hey, maybe, we've heard from the local nursing home. Hey, they really like having the game on because, there's great grandparents or grandparents that are in the home who can't leave. They've got to be there under care, but they can watch it online. We have an opportunity as a broadcast program to serve something greater than ourselves. And that's a mission that I love. And Taylor, I know you're all about that. That's why we
That's
created
why we
this
started, yeah.
company. That's why we're doing what we're doing. It's the greater mission. So when you can remind students of that and use those incentives to like, hey, it's a long week. This is our third game this week. Let's have a pizza party before. I mean, that can really lift morale. Just don't make it the expectation.
If you can get students to understand that they're showing up because going live is an adrenaline rush, which we're going to talk about, like Hoosier said, people are watching. I think showing them the analytics of how many people are watching puts a little pressure on them, makes them show up, that their role mattered. And if they don't show up, if they flake out, and their friends are on the team, they are letting down not just their friends, you as the teacher, but an entire community if you flake out on this broadcast. Putting a little pressure on students, I think, is a good thing. And we know we've had it happen. Things come up. Uh, Kids get sick or they have jobs. They've got lots of responsibilities. We're not trying to put pressure on them and guilt them into showing up, but just those little reminders of like, hey guys, look at the analytics. We had 400 people watching this game last night. A lot of kids kind of get jacked up and excited about that. Some may go, "Ooh, that's not for me." It's okay. Have those conversations. But that really creates and goes into our next segment of culture. Culture makes commitment stick. When you build it right, they want to be there. So let's talk about culture for a second. We've seen really great programs create amazing cultures. We've seen it in sports, but it takes work, it takes prep, it takes practice throughout the week, responsibility and ownership, all the things we've been talking about. But if students aren't looking forward to game night and they're dreading it, or they're going just to get the free food, they don't really care about the work that's got to be done. Most likely something's off in your program and you're not maybe connecting with the students in the right way. Hoosier, you've coached, you're son of a coach, you've been around athletics. Let's connect kind of culture building on the broadcast side with how it looks on the athletic side.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about um, as we watch even the college landscape, it's one of the things that people are talking about. There's NIL deals, there's a transfer portal, and college athletics used to be you joined a team and you played for 4 years or you redshirted and you got a fifth year. That was the way. That's what made college different than the professionals.
Mhm.
And now it's like, okay, maybe there's only a skill difference, right? Because man, we're just out of the first transfer portal, the January transfer portal for college football and other sports. It's crazy. It's like who's on whose team? It's like I don't even know who what the name is of the person I want to root for on my team because I don't know if they committed or not. Anyway, but having a great culture is one that everyone wants to be involved, right? There was a culture in the broadcast program when I was in high school with the students that I worked with. We genuinely were friends. I talked about it in episode 1, I think a little bit, but we sat and ate lunch together. That's the kind of group that we were. And it wasn't that I had no other place to sit because being on the sports team, your dad's a coach. Yeah, the kids that are, in that quote unquote cool club kind of had to be nice to me because otherwise, they'd upset coach and end up running. That never happened. But the idea was there that, like, yeah, I could sit with anybody, but I really enjoyed, hanging out with the people that I broadcasted with because they were the people I spent the most time with. They were the ones that, yeah, building that culture and trusting each other and knowing that they were gonna show up for me made me wanna show up for them as well. And, when there was a rough night on the mic when I was broadcasting, I just, for whatever reason, couldn't say things right or I felt bad. I thought I let the team down. And even to today, when I'm supporting our schools and something goes wrong and I can't immediately fix it, Taylor could probably vouch for me. I get really, almost distraught to a
Frustrated.
certain extent. Like, I'm
Yeah,
like, because everyone's depending on me to help them, and that's not a hero mindset. That is just, I want to help. I want to make sure that it works for them. And so, um, yeah, I think culture is huge. You got to have people buy in, and again, that culture goes back to the right reasons too. That's a huge thing. If there is a mission and there is a vision, you will build culture and you will start to spot the people who are in it for the wrong reasons. And at a high school level, it's probably not intentional, like we were talking about with the incentives, but it definitely leads to needing to have a conversation with that student saying, "Hey, are you fully on board with our mission?" Or, because there can be some people, and I've experienced this, and I won't throw anyone under the bus, but there have been students who get into the play by play who think it's all about them. They think they're destined for ESPN. And it's kind of, in a weird way, kind of justice when they go to college and suddenly realize that there are other people who are just as good as them, or if not better. So that's kind of a side note to just tell your students, like, hey, you right now you feel like a big fish, but you're in a small pond. You're at your local high school. Wait till you go to college where there's other people. And so when people are like that and they start making it all about them, you lose the service aspect. You lose the teamwork. Again, we'll just keep hammering it. It's a teamwork based thing.
yep,
Just like athletics, just like it is in band. If one instrument plays the wrong note, everyone hears it. So keep that teamwork aspect together and build the culture and have fun. Because again, it is a chance for students to learn how to do broadcasting. And so we don't want to make it all professional. And I even see this when we do our state events with students. There are crews that we will invite, and I'm like, they've got the culture right, because when the broadcast is over, my cheeks hurt from like smiling and laughing with them, but I also know in my head that we pulled off a phenomenal broadcast, right? So we had fun while still doing our job correctly. And that's when I know that, that program, that teacher's hit gold, is because I'm even involved in it and I'm having fun. And I'm not even a part of their thing regularly. But just that one moment, I'm like, they've got it.
yeah, and you can tell right away. And one of the things, I know this sounds weird, and we talked about gear, how gear doesn't matter, but one of the things that is transformational to your program, especially if you're doing multicam, even if you have just one camera, is, communication headsets so that students can talk to each other during the game. Those conversations, it's internal communication, and Jordan shared some great insights. He nailed it. The gym's loud. They're on the headsets. He's hopped on. He's coaching students. He's had to jump on the camera and he's kind of talking smack like, oh, my camera is getting more live action than your camera. And that kind of motivates some students or kind of makes them step up their game. But that environment that you create is a huge part of your culture. And then getting them to stick around to clean up. I experienced this with Marcus at JCC. I'll give him a shout out. It was homecoming night and they had a ton of stuff they had to break down and clean up. And 2 or 3 of the students stayed back to clean up, and they didn't care about the homecoming dance that was gonna start. They wanted to stay, and they were laughing and smiling. They were having an amazing time. It was raining outside. We're in the press box. Like, that is what showed me how important culture is as part of your broadcast program, that they wanna stick around and help you clean up as a teacher. That says a lot. So the comm systems, if you got questions on that, we sell those. It's not a distraction. It's an amazing opportunity for students to connect, build chemistry. They can problem solve, like, hey, let's get better at that. The director's talking to the camera ops, and it truly makes them feel like a team. Because if you're just doing camera and you're not talking to anyone, you don't really feel like it matters. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I it's a very isolating feeling when you are just running a camera and have no direction. Again, a lot of the broadcasts I did in high school were single camera, one person on a laptop, and me as the announcer. And all of a sudden, I'd kind of look over the computer and our camera was on the wrong side of the court. And I'm like, well, how'd that happen? And I'm like, well, the kid probably just got bored. You're moving the camera back and forth,
Yeah,
but that's all you're doing. And it happens. And sometimes, they're trying to troubleshoot and they forget to move the camera. And that's where something as simple as comms, like, hey, by the way, your camera's not on the right side of the court. Again, gentle reminder, don't, make them feel, bad about it. Just remind them, hey, you're still doing your job. And but yeah, it's a very isolating feeling. And then I got on comms, and actually my first experience with comms, there was almost too much communication.
that can
We
happen.
were
Yeah.
doing Heartland events and I was running the floor camera for the first time, and I just had earbuds, and it had both what the announcers were saying and all 10 people on the crew. And I remember, like, and I ran it for, there were 8 games, so I was on the floor for 8 games in a row. I had to call my dad to come pick me up to drive me home because I was exhausted. And then I remember laying in bed and all I could hear were just voices. And that was it.
That's
And I was like,
amazing.
yeah, I'm like, this is so crazy, but I'm just hearing over and over the cues. And I'm
Yeah,
like sitting there, I'm like, I can't move my camera up because I don't have a camera. But when you just hear voices in your ear for 16 hours straight, there is something that as you're trying to go to sleep, that's all you hear. And so
it's
it's just
great.
a funny story of like students are hearing, and it's the same reason that when they're playing games with each other on, the Xbox or
Yeah.
PlayStation,
Yep.
everyone's got a headset. You gotta communicate.
Yeah.
It's
It's
core
important.
principle number 1 to life, communication.
So when the culture is right, um, we have seen, and you've probably hopefully experienced, the work is leading to something that's pretty exciting. Going live is exciting, adrenaline rush. The broadcast is the reward. It's game night. That's when you get to show your talents and the prep that you've done all week. And students want to show up because their peers are counting on them and the community is counting on them. So that's when commitment sticks and your culture is really thriving. All right. Practical reset for teachers, Hoosier. If students aren't showing up, don't ask, how do I motivate them? Ask instead, does this program mean something? Back to why did we start this? Do students own roles or are they just tasks when they show up? They're just going to move a camera back and forth. Are boundaries clear? And would this survive without me chasing it? And that's you as the teacher. So, what's one boundary a teacher could set this week, Hoosh?
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers get involved in the setup of the gear. Train your students how to do it.
Yes.
And this one's huge because not only does it spread out the knowledge, uh, I I can't remember if I was talking to a teacher or was on the podcast, but when one person holds all the knowledge, it's great until that person can't be there, and then everything is a disaster. So spread out that knowledge to your students of how all the equipment works and plugs in. It allows them to troubleshoot if something goes wrong. It lightens your workload of having to set everything up and being the one in charge. And then if they know how to set it up, they know how to tear it down. So you have just saved yourself time by teaching them how to do that. And then it feels to them like, hey, this really, it becomes their role. I am the camera person. Everything that is involved with the camera equipment, setting up, running it, tearing it down, that's my responsibility. And when you can turn it into something like that, students will buy in a lot quicker, and you as a teacher will save time. So that's very practical, very easy to do. So just do it and see what happens.
And we'd love to hear from you and post that in Future Ready Educators of your students setting up the broadcast this next week. Thanks, Hoosh. That's episode 2. We'll see you guys next time. If students are showing up, that's a win. Seriously, most teachers don't even get to where maybe you're at if you have students showing up. So, congrats. But here's the part nobody really prepares you for. When students say yes, when they commit, they keep showing up, that doesn't actually automatically make things easier. In fact, we found for a lot of programs, that's when things start to get really messy when you have a bunch of students showing up. You don't know maybe where they're supposed to fit in, what they're supposed to do. Expectations aren't clear. And the teacher, you end up quietly kind of becoming the safety net for everything. We've talked about that. So you've got students coming, but now where do you put them? And that's what we're going to talk about in episode 3 next. We're going to talk about why things can still fall apart after students say yes, and how to build ownership and accountability without turning yourself into a full time babysitter. And that should resonate with you and make you want to come back and listen because buy in's important. We know that, but execution is what actually makes the program work and take you to that next level. So we'll see you next time on episode 3 of the Broadcast Ops Playbook.